Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Right Reason, the show where we reason rightly. That's why we called it Right Reason, because we reason rightly on it. Anyway, the man who tells us how to right reason or reason rightly is Dr. Charles Rice, Professor Emeritus,
Michael,
Notre Dame Law School. And we're going to resume a conversation that we had at the end of our last episode, dealing larger topic. We were dealing with Humanae Vitae and Pope Paul VI encyclical, expressing and restating the Church's condemnation of birth control, in this case artificial contraception, the pill, etc. But for a larger reason here, a larger picture is that when sexual immorality becomes widespread to the point of it becomes sort of the norm in a culture, that really becomes the harbinger for economies to begin falling apart. And when economies fall apart, well, then political systems fall apart, and what you have is essentially the end of a civilization.
Right.
And now some people don't necessarily see that jump, but I want to get to it for a second here, that when economies flow from natural human cycles, economies are not imposed on human cycles. Human cycles are what economies come from. So we have a natural, people, reach a certain age, they have children. Those children then need, families then get bigger and they need to buy houses and, buy clothes and cars. And so, the way we live is the economy flows from that. If we alter the way we live and people don't get married, so they don't really feel a need to go buy a house together because they don't want to feel like they're going to get, well, we're not really connected here, so why are we going to invest in a house? And they don't have children. All these things make major shifts in the way economies, keep moving along, or in our case now, start to slow down and stop moving along. Right. So that's kind of the connection there. So the Church's teachings on sex derive from the natural law, and the natural law is what's sort of inherent in who we are. And if we alter the way we should be living based on who we are, everything is up for grabs.
Right.
So there's a nice sum up of what we're talking about.
Well, the reason for that is the effect on the family.
Right.
Because sexual immorality and ignoring the norms built into our nature on the use of that faculty will destroy the family. The family is the basic society. Mm-hmm. The state did not create marriage. Right. The family and marriage goes back to Genesis, and the family goes back to Genesis. So we're talking about Humanae Vitae, and what we always have to remember is that what the Catholic Church is teaching was the unbroken teaching of Christianity up until 1930.
Including Protestants.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the Comstock laws and all those restrictive laws on contraception were passed by Protestant legislatures in the 19th century. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we tend to ignore that.
Yeah, and of course those laws that were passed in the 19th century came from the Protestant tradition as well as the Catholic tradition of the understanding of what sex is, what its purpose is, everything. I mean, this was all unified. Right. It was all unified. There were theological, dogmatic differences, but not here.
And you're seeing some Protestant and evangelical reaction to this collapse, focusing on contraception.
Yeah.
Pastor Donald.
Some of them are finally getting it.
Yeah, Albert Mohler of the Southern Baptist, but Pastor Donald Sensing, for example, of Trinity United Methodist Church in Franklin, Tennessee, wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal online in March of 2004, in which he said he was opposed to same-sex marriage. He said, those of us who are trying to prevent same-sex marriage are a little late. He said, we're 40 years too late.
That's right.
He said, because that issue was decided with the pill. Mm-hmm. He said the pill made marriage irrelevant, except as an economic measure to allocate property and so on.
Right.
And it changed the whole landscape, and he was right. He was right. So you're dealing with so many impacts of the contraception thing. Let's talk about same-sex marriage.
Yeah, and let's talk about about because it's true. I mean, that's a good insight by the pastor, but I don't think it's one that immediately jumps to mind of most people. They think, oh, heterosexual over here and what's going on over there, homosexual, doesn't really have anything to do with each other. Well, yeah, there's a lot in common there, but not in the way you'd think. We've gotten to this whole question of same-sex, marriage, civil unions, whatever. Different, same thing, different coat, different suit. First of all, what's wrong with the notion of same-sex sex before we start talking about marriage and how it's going to play out in law? What's wrong with homosexual acts?
Well, if I can first of all just mention what the Catechism says, all right? Some may criticize us for quoting the Catechism, but
well, too bad it's our show.
No, the Catholic Catechism says that persons with homosexual inclination are entitled to respect and dignity. They are persons and so on. But it says homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered because they do not have any procreative aspect. And,
now back up a second, because when you say disordered, you hear this a lot. The whole gay rights movement is like, disordered, you think we're crazy. That's not what it means, right?
No, it's morally disordered. It's the act, for example, of shoplifting is a disordered act.
Because the proper order is that you take it, pay for it, and walk out the door
exactly,
with it. Right.
Yeah, because it's contrary to our nature.
Right.
See, because our nature is to live in community, and theft is contrary to that. And it's true of any morally disordered act. The act is disordered because it's contrary to our nature.
Now, the argument again, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because a lot of people
Go
are
ahead.
going, well, wait a minute. So let's do wait a minute here. What about for the fellow or the girl who says, wait a minute, it is my nature. I was born that way. God made me that way. If they don't believe in God, they were just kind of genetically born that way. So what about people who make that argument? You can say, yeah, it's nature, but for a heterosexual, it would be against his nature to go have homosexual sex. But what about for the guy who says, well, this is my nature?
There simply is no basis in science for saying that there's a gay gene. There is not.
Right.
All right, and it goes back to Genesis. God made them male and female, and the whole concept here of sexual activity. What's it about? Well, it's the conjugal act is, as we said before, an icon of the Trinity. I mean, God has chosen to allow Himself to be subject to us for the creation of new citizens for the kingdom of heaven. And you do this through the conjugal act, which is really an icon of the Trinity. It's a representation of the Trinity, the mutual gift and mutual love and so on. And
but even if you lay aside the theological argument of that, because maybe somebody's watching who's Jewish or atheist or agnostic or whatever. I mean, there's even something even more basic here that, clearly this act, if not interrupted or twisted or perverted, the whole purpose of it is for children. That's what it is.
Well, yeah. I mean,
that's what happens.
Well,
that's why we're sitting here.
Okay, it is. Wait a minute now. It is in the sense that
physically, I mean.
Yeah, in the sense that those two meanings can't be separated.
Correct.
By man of both sexes, by on man's initiative.
Right.
I mean, sterile people who are incapable of having children can still get married.
Sure.
All right, but the the homosexual thing is totally different because of the fact that the boys should marry girls and girls should marry boys because that's the way human nature is. It is true in terms of the bodily situation. It's true in terms of the whole plan of nature. I mean, that it cannot if you look, produce new taxpayers, all right? Just can't. Right? So the reason why that progression you mentioned at the first is true is because it affects the family.
Right.
All right. Now we're into this whole bit of same-sex marriage.
Right.
And you got to let's make some distinctions here. The civil unions are different from legal recognition of same-sex marriage.
Mm-hmm.
You have more states recognizing civil unions than recognize formally same-sex marriage.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? Well, the marriage legally has what we call the incidents of marriage. And the legal incidents of marriage are legal rights or privileges that are coupled to the marital relationship.
Mm-hmm.
For example,
Such as?
usual example, right to visit somebody in a hospital, all right? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, in Vermont, when they passed the civil union statute, they listed 23 or 24 of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had hunting licenses, and these are rights, that inheritance, property rights, that kind of thing, that are in the law specifically keyed to the marriage relationship. You inherit because you're the spouse, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The important thing to remember is that in the legal aspect, the civil unions are entirely a matter of state decision.
Mm-hmm.
That if the state takes a privilege, for example, as has come up in some states, the issue of right to visit
mm-hmm.
somebody in the hospital in a critical care situation. If the state decouples that from marriage mm-hmm. and says anybody can visit who is an inhabitant of the same house, mm-hmm. then it is no longer an incident of marriage. All right? The civil union, so-called, gives to same-sex couples the legal incidents of marriage. Mm-hmm. All right? Now, as I said, they can vary from state to state. The same-sex marriage simply adds to it the formality that they are married. Mm-hmm. All right? And the question is, what's the effect of that? Well, it legitimizes the relationship. The proponents of that will say, well, that doesn't affect you. I mean, what do you care? Right. If Freddie and Harry are described as being married, how does that hurt your marriage or you? And that's a very prevalent question, and the answer is that it does hurt the integrity and the durability of marriage as a social institution. Mm-hmm. Because what you're doing is equating this activity, which has been treated from scriptural times as the Catechism said, an act of grave depravity, mm-hmm. Treating that as equivalent to the marriage relationship. So that's one of the problems with it, and it's an aspect of the homosexualization mm-hmm. of our culture. And we recently had in South Bend the City Council adopted a resolution.
Oh no.
On sexual orientation.
Oh no, I didn't want to hear where this is going. Okay.
yeah, they did.
What they said?
Saying no discrimination by businesses, and they had a limited exception for churches, which wasn't worth much, or on the basis of sexual orientation. And once you get into that, you very quickly reach situations which are just unsustainable in reason. I mean, you have...
Well, yeah, because the challenge comes if you say there's no discrimination, then the next thing is, well, wait a minute, now you're discriminating. My gay partner and I go up to the this and that, and you're discriminating against this, and it just keeps advancing.
Well,
You've
yes.
got to open a door before you can walk through it.
Right, but you also have, you have problems arising from the definition of, first of all, gender identity, and secondly, sexual orientation. You have although nobody wants to talk about it, you have the genuine issue of such things as restrooms.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and
they want to talk about it in Europe.
well, yeah, I
And
know.
they have it's just all a natural progression. It has to be a natural progression.
Right.
It has to be. We're going to take a break and come back. But when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of things about, is there a way legally to begin to stem this? We've got, the Obama administration, when we're taping this, wants to upend the DOMA laws, and
Right.
I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago there were no states that had same-sex marriage. Now there's 8, plus
Right,
the District of Columbia. So this is advancing, and it's going to continue advancing. Is there a legal remedy for this? And we'll talk about that as soon as we come right back. Well, welcome back to Right Reason with Dr. Charlie Rice. We are talking about the legality. We're going to get into the legality here of same-sex unions, particularly same-sex marriage. But we see this. I mean, you'd have to be blind to not see this. The progression here. It's now the military finally, had to cave in under the weight of this, and is there some sort of legal remedy to this? I mean, every time you turn around, first there's the non-discrimination, then there's a couple little transitions, then it's civil unions, and then civil unions, and quite frankly, I don't think most people, with the exception of the word marriage, I don't think most people see the difference between a civil union and a marriage in the sense of the legal, not obviously the sacramental part, but the legal part. I don't think most people walking down the street know the difference.
Well, the difference is a formal difference, and
but practically, it's no difference.
Essentially, it's true.
Yeah.
The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in 2004 issued a document called Considerations on this subject, and they said either one is unsustainable and unsupportable in terms of the law, because it recognizes what it does is elevate conduct which is essentially harmful and as well as immoral to the level of
a good
and essentially a marriage, either formally through same-sex marriage or inferentially through civil unions. But the legal remedies, it's up to the states. See, the U.S.
right now it is.
Yeah, the U.S. The U.S. Constitution has nothing to say about the definition of marriage. That's up to the states.
But can't you envision, Doctor? I'm just curious on I'm not a lawyer. You obviously are much more schooled in this than practically most people walking around on the planet. Can you foresee a situation where someone walks up, like we got abortion because of a state law,
right?
Being overturned. Can somebody walk up and say, and I've got to imagine this is in the works somewhere, or at least thought of as strategy. Somebody's like, oh wait, they can get married over there in Massachusetts, but I can't get married over here in Utah. So I want to appeal this, and next thing you know, there you are standing in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Does the U.S. Supreme Court, sure, legally they can back off and say, well, it's just not our jurisdiction, but I mean, how likely would that be?
It depends. I mean, the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, the Obama administration is not supporting it. That recognized the authority of the states to decide the same-sex marriage question.
So if that gets overturned?
Well, we'll see. I mean, the problem, is that the definition of marriage is up to the states. The full faith and credit clause comes in because that requires each state to give full faith and credit to the acts, records, and proceedings of other states.
Mm-hmm.
And
so in other words, if you're a gay couple married in Massachusetts, then Utah has to accept you as being married.
Well, that's not. We don't know that yet.
Right.
You see,
that's that's
yeah.
kind of in theory.
And
what's
that
there.
could end up as a Supreme Court decision.
Mm-hmm.
Congress said, well, the states can do with this what they want, and the issue may end up with the Supreme Court dealing with that. But the full faith and credit clause has generally included an exception for a strong public policy. If there's the law of another state, which they're trying to enforce in your state, violates a strong public policy of your state,
mm-hmm.
there may be an exception to that. But that's the legal question, which possibly could end up with the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and so we don't know what the ultimate outcome of that is. Right now, it's on the level of state determination, and it's going in favor of same-sex marriage. And I think the reason is the cultural definition of rights. The rights
it's just shifted.
They're defined not as the Constitution generally restricted rights to protections against government action.
Mm-hmm.
They're now tending to be defined in an individualistic way as an entitlement to do things, an entitlement to be able to, as an individualistic thing. And
where does that come from, do you think?
I think it comes from the whole concept of the individualistic culture that we're dealing with. And Iredell Jenkins, who was a great law professor at the University of Alabama, actually, was on the board of the American Journal of Jurisprudence at Notre Dame, a very fine scholar. And he wrote an article a number of years ago, about 20 years ago, called The Concept of Rights and the Competence of Courts. It was in the American Journal of Jurisprudence at Notre Dame. And he analyzed the changing concept of rights so that rights are no longer primarily considered as being protections against government action, but rather they're being regarded as individualistic entitlements, not only in terms of, and I'm entitled not to have the government interfere with me. I'm entitled to health care, this, that, or the other thing, as a legal matter. And there's some truth to that. But his point was that when that gets carried away, it can distort things so that you end up with a concept of rights which does not affect the common good, does not take into account the common good. So the reason we're losing the homosexual same-sex marriage thing is because it's simply considered
just a right.
Of these two individuals to make a contract, which, as Pastor Sensing said, as I mentioned last time, in the Wall Street Journal in March 2004, he said, marriage has, because of the pill, and because it's no longer connected with procreation, marriage has become simply and primarily a means of adjusting property rights. Now, a same-sex couple has the ability to do that anyway by a contract, you see.
Get a lawyer, make a contract.
Yeah, and in many other ways they can arrange their affairs by making a contract. But this, the same-sex marriage thing, I think is becoming treated exclusively as an interference. What are you guys trying to do? You're trying to
Right.
deprive these loving people of
Their rights.
their rights. So,
Yeah.
and so I think that issue is. I think Pastor Sensing was right. I think it's lost
Yeah.
in human terms, and
Sure.
and it's lost because of the total acceptance of the contraceptive ethic. Because if it's entirely up to human beings as to whether sex has any relation to procreation,
Sure.
then you're not going to have a rational reason why Freddie and Harry can't get a marriage license.
Right.
All right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think goes back to Humanae Vitae.
It's it's interesting when you look at the Pope Paul VI's of list of warnings, I guess you could possibly say. Even he didn't envision, at least explicitly in the writing. Even he didn't lay out that the whole homosexual movement thing would happen. I mean, it's just interesting watching the great unraveling of this entire. What you're talking about, 1800 years of Western civilization unraveled in 50.
And it goes back to contraception.
Yeah, right back to
Contraception
1968.
is the defining issue.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but contraception is itself a symptom of the Enlightenment culture, which is secularist, relativist, and individualist.
Right.
All right, and that's where contraception comes from.
Mm-hmm.
But once you recognize it, you can't look at all the other things. I mean, pornography. All right, most popular indoor sport in college dorms appears to be internet porn. All right.
Oh, sure.
Some people would say, all right.
Yeah,
I have no survey. All right.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all of this and you say, where is the possibility, humanly speaking, where is the possibility to pull back from any of this? And humanly speaking, I don't, just personally, I don't see this as a question of the bus is, rapidly heading towards the precipice. I see it as the bus has already gone off and we're just waiting for it to hit the bottom. Because where do you come back? You can't tell, you can't tell two generations of people that that you are the center of the universe. You individual are the center of the universe, and you have all these rights accruing to you, and more are accruing to you all the time, and to blazes with the common good, and then expect that somehow the common good can be rescued from all of this. I mean, how does that happen?
I think you have to have two things, right? I think you have prayer. You need prayer.
Right.
Most important thing is prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversion of the American people to respect for God and His laws, all right? And secondly, the Catholic Church has to teach, in the United States especially.
Let's wrap up with, because we're getting close to our time, let's wrap up with that thought in particular.
Yeah.
Look, Cardinal Dolan said, a few weeks ago, from the time of this taping, that the bishops just folded house when it came to teaching what they should have been teaching about.
That's correct.
Contraception, sexual morality, et cetera, et cetera. That has really proven now to be that fact, not that he said it, that fact really has proven to be the kind of, the tipping point.
Right.
When the push came to the shove, they shut up.
Right.
And look at everything. How do you recover this now? How does the American hierarchy recover this situation? Is it recoverable?
Yes, I think it is.
Okay.
And I think it may relate to the tax exemption. When he was a senator, Lyndon Johnson in the 1950s proposed the Johnson Amendment, which became the provision of the U.S. Code, which forbids tax-exempt organizations, 501c3 and other organizations, from endorsing candidates, all right? And participating in electoral politics. The Catholic Church, I think, and it's 20/20 hindsight, all right, but the Catholic Church, in my opinion, made a mistake in not challenging that to the utmost. Because since that time, the Church has been on the sidelines and has been, to a great extent, a function of, it's become almost, the U.S. Catholic Conference, as some people say, was the Democratic Party at prayer, all right? And I think the church has to recover the willingness to teach the truth. And interestingly,
So you're saying the church should give up the 501c3 so it can get
not
more involved?
necessarily. I think they...
or risk losing it?
Well, the IRS, I wrote an article on this recently. In fact, it's on some websites or whatever, but the IRS itself, in its fact sheet and its advisory to people, makes the point that the head of a 501c3, or a clergyman, a minister, presumably a bishop, can endorse a candidate, as long as he says it's my personal decision. And he doesn't do it in an activity of the church.
Right.
Can't do it from the pulpit. Can't do it in a church bulletin.
Right.
But the candidate, this is the example they use. The candidate can list Reverend so-and-so, the minister of the First Baptist Church, as endorsing my candidacy. And they could do a lot. They could do a lot today in terms of making it clear that there are some issues that really morally dictate the way you should vote.
Yeah.
And abortion is one of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, so that's...
Do you see this happening? You got 1 minute left. Do you see that happening?
Not likely. But,
but it should.
It should. And the most important thing, honestly, that that we can do is pray.
Yeah.
We got to pray for a moral miracle. We got to pray that the Catholic Church will begin in the United States to teach, and we got to pray.
Doctor, we never have wide-ranging discussions here, do we? They're never interesting. They're never wide-ranging. They're very parochial, very narrow.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we never non-judgmental.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Very much. Well, Doctor, thank you once again for
Thank
coming.
you. My pleasure.
Tremendous.
Okay.
We'll wrap up with this edition of Right Reason and ask you to tune in to our next one. We're not even sure what we'll talk about on that next one, but it's a little bit down the road. But it will certainly be not wide-ranging, not interesting. Now, there's a promo that you never want to say. God bless everybody. Michael Voris, thank you very much.